It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Conversations with Joan. Conversations with Joan will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life's Conversations with Joan. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Conversations with Joan focuses on topics that are important to your life, from health and wellness to professional development to personal well-being. Change makers join me to share their insights, tips, and strategies so you can thrive and live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Now, let's start talking. Throughout the past year, we faced challenges that most have never experienced. The coronavirus pandemic brought health concerns, financial worries, and isolation. But even with the pain felt by many, people responded with love, care, and compassion. Today's guest, Tim Shriver, saw this as an opportunity for people to come together, and so he organized the Call to Unite event. That event featured nearly 300 participants, raised more than $85 million toward relief, and reached tens of millions of viewers. Tim is the founder of Unite, the longtime chair of Special Olympics, a best-selling author, and a founding force of the social and emotional learning movement. He is the co-editor of the book, The Call to Unite, Voices of Hope and Awakening. Welcome, Tim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Joan. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here, Tim, because this has been an incredibly challenging time for many people, and often it's easy to focus on the negatives. But what did you see happening during the pandemic that you believe offers us hope?
Well, I think I just see the best in people, and I don't think I see that just myself. I think many of us see it. We just don't hear stories about it, and we don't see it in the media. We see the worst of us in the media. And as the pandemic broke out, I thought to myself, well, here's a chance. Now we're really going to come together because it's obvious that we all have to work together. And the stories I saw in the media were the opposite. Now we're more divided than ever. And I thought to myself, look, let's tell a different story. We can't live in that world where this kind of hatred and outrage and acrimony is the norm all the time. So when we reached out to people, whether it was to Oprah or to President Bush or to, singers like Common or Amy Grant or to, Jennifer Garner or Julia Roberts, they all said, yes, we agree. We need to tell a new story. And when we reached out to average nurses and doctors and grocery store clerks, and they said the same thing, that I've got a version of us that's much more united than what I see on the air. So we put it all together into this book, The Call to Unite. And, it's really an invitation to change our minds, not necessarily to change our minds about politics. That's a hard one, but to change our minds about ourselves, to change our minds about who we are, who I am. And this is a book that invites us to, even if we're struggling and in pain, even if we're frustrated, even if we're worried about the future, even if we've got a lot of grief, a lot of us are in a tough time right now, still.
Yeah.
And this is a book of friends you haven't met yet who are ready to give you the support you need to come through this time and find a way to celebrate even in the midst of the pain.
And so, Tim, your goal is to help people reject an us versus them thinking. But recently it feels like our differences have really overshadowed what we have in common. We're feeling divided. So how do you think we can go about becoming a unified people when some voices discourage it?
Well, I think we have to practice it. The Columbia scholar Peter Coleman says, the change of this nature, he writes in the Scientific American, requires a disassembly and a reorientation of our deep structure. And then he goes on, our assumptions, our values, the incentives that determine our decision-making. That it's a deep shift, So that's why so many people in this book invite us to quiet, to practices of calm and self-regulation and peace. People, like Amy Grant teach her meditation practice. Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams teaches us how to find a depth dimension in our lives. Many of the mental health experts counsel the same thing. A deep shifting of calm within ourselves, self-compassion. It's hard to have compassion for others when we don't have it for ourselves, right?
Right.
And then there's a sense in which we have to learn how to cross boundaries. That doesn't mean we agree all the time. It means that When we disagree, we try to do so by first giving the other person their dignity, not trying to violate their dignity, not contempt and hatred and outrage, because that's not going to change anybody. At the end of the day, contempt just makes people dig in. Contempt is a constraining force. So sometimes we think, if I just scream loud enough at the other person, they're going to change. Actually, it's the opposite. What allows people to change, what releases constriction, is dignity and not feeling labeled and misjudged. So, part of this is the inner work. Part of it is building new structures of relationships. Our schools need to teach social and emotional learning. And then we just have to have leaders who get us working together. I don't know whether we can get that from Washington. I'm not sure.
Right.
It gets discouraging sometimes watching our political leaders. But I think a lot of times we could find leaders who would get us to cross the boundary and try to solve the problems together. I think a lot of new solutions would emerge that aren't the old, tired solutions that split us apart.
But Tim, that way of thinking, it gives each one of us tremendous power because we're always looking to someone else to solve our problems, but it really does begin with us.
It does begin with us, and it begins with, and this is the tough part, I would say, when people are in pain, as many of us are. I think of T.D. Jakes in this book, The Call to Unite. He says, I don't run from pain, I run to it.
Right.
I look for the morsel of wisdom, a new perspective, a greater tenacity, he writes. He doesn't say that pain is a gift. He said pain leaves a gift. So we have to be a little bit gutsy here now, in the midst of pain, in the midst of struggle, in the midst of injustice, still to trust that we can do this, that I can do this. A lot of the people in here, Courtney Meadows, she's a grocery store clerk at Kroger's. She's in the book. Why? Because she describes seeing the little kids coming through her lines and standing there and choosing more than anything to be positive, So next time you're in that grocery store line and you're racing through and you're hurried, maybe make eye contact. Maybe it's just for a second with that clerk. And with thousands of small interactions like that, we don't just change others, we change ourselves.
Right. It's shifting from a me mentality to one of collective benefit.
Yeah, my friend, Charlemagne, who's a radio host, says, if you took the word illness, it starts with an I. Change the I to we. What do you get? Wellness. It's a pretty big shift, right? When we see ourselves as part of a whole, as belonging and participating in a whole. Yeah, it's a little scary because sometimes you say, well, I don't trust a lot of people out there. I don't know if I can trust him or her or them or this. But if each of us takes the baby steps towards participation in the whole, then the whole becomes more trustworthy and more compassionate and more just. And that's what this book is all about. It's an invitation to people to discover, even in your pain, even when you're in a tough time, there's a voice here inviting you to the best in you and the best in others. And trying to follow that voice, not always easy, but almost always a more fruitful and I think a more hopeful path.
Tim, as a former teacher, looking at what our children have been through during this pandemic, first of all, what problems do you think we're going to face down the road with our kids? And how can we incorporate these lessons that you're teaching? How can we pass these on to our kids?
Yeah, so Esther Wojcicki is in the book, a person who spent her life in education, reminding us to teach compassion. That's the message of the social and emotional learning movement, the SEL movement. The organization I helped launch, cyacyl, C-A-S-E-L, has thousands of resources for teachers who want to teach empathy, who want to teach stress management, who want to teach problem solving, who want to teach a sense of empowered, teach creativity, teach these gifts of the inner life and the relational life. We got to do this in schools because otherwise the stress, the fear that our children have. Let's remember, children who've seen loss in their families, who've seen all the uncertainty in the world, we've taken from them something that is almost one of the most essential gifts of childhood, which is structure and confidence and safety. We're going to have to rebuild that safety now, the emotional safety, the relational safety. So we've got to give our teachers the time, the training to shift their own pedagogies, their own styles, and introduce these curricula first for themselves, because sometimes the teachers themselves need a refresher course on managing their own inner lives and managing their own biases, helping to overturn their assumptions that these kids are going to come back and they're going to be out of control. Well, maybe not, and so if we give teachers the support, give parents the support, and make sure that mental health is at the center of academic health and cultural, social, family health.
You just mentioned empathy, compassion, problem solving, gifts of inner life. You've been a longtime chair of Special Olympics. What lessons can those athletes teach that can help us to achieve this goal with our children?
Well, the athletes of Special Olympics are the greatest teachers of the single lesson, which is that you should never be afraid of the judgment of others. So many Americans, people of color, indigenous communities, many times women, people of different sexual orientations, people with disabilities, they've been judged, labeled, thrown out, oppressed. The athletes of Special Olympics have endured that in a way, very, very, very painful way, that labeling. And yet they choose over and over again not to be judged by that. They still go to the starting line. They still run their race. They still put their arms up in the air. They are never, in my experience, never defeated by the oppression of the culture. And, in my view, that's a big message. We don't have to excuse oppression, but a uniter reminds the world they are not defeated by it at all. That they have the strength and the courage and the bravery to end it. So, the athletes of Special Olympics, boy, all I would say to folks is if you hear about a community event on a Saturday afternoon this summer when Special Olympics athletes are out running track or out swimming in the pool, go down and spend an hour, just watch, just take a coffee or a tea or a sandwich. You don't have to have a ticket, just watch. And I will be shocked if you don't find yourself feeling like you're in the presence of a transformational force in those athletes. Not that you helped, but that you were taught a lesson about how to reveal all of you that's good and decent and loving and not be afraid of anything that can stop you.
And Tim, what does the organization need from each of us? How can we get involved and help?
Well, right now, Special Olympics, of course, we need volunteers, and it's been very difficult for many of our local programs. Many of them have had to shutter things just because, the financial support just hasn't been there the way we might have hoped, which is understandable. But now we've got to reinvest in those things that remind us of the best in us. And here at Unite, at unite.us, this book, I think, look, if people comment on the book, start discussions about the book, here's the message you send. It's not a message about Tim Shriver. Believe me, I'm just the editor. The contributions are from hundreds, over 100 people. But when you engage with the book, you're sending a message to others that this is the important story, not what you're watching on the cable news channels, not what you're watching and listening to on hateful radio or other kinds of things. The story that you want to support is the story of uniters finding a new story of us. So I respectfully ask people, go on Amazon, write a comment. If you can afford it, buy 2 or 3 books, give them away. Give them to people who are struggling right now. Give them to people who want to have a reason to celebrate. Give them to those who maybe have missed a graduation or a birthday. Use this book as a handbook for building and strengthening both the inner life we're all hungry to find ways to strengthen, as well as the story of us, the American story. Oprah's in the book, and she says nations have an inner life. Imagine that. I hadn't thought of that before I read it from her. Countries have an inner life. This is a book that's offering a collective inner life for us, not just for me. Not really a self-help book. It's an us-help book. I think we can all be supportive of us, I dare say, just by, sharing this book with your friends on social media, commenting on it. And I think we start then a different conversation. And slowly, but surely, that's the way things change.
The book is The Call to Unite, Voices of Hope and Awakening. Tim, in about 30 seconds or less, what's the takeaway? What message of hope do you want to leave our listeners with?
Believe in yourself and believe in others. There's a new story emerging in our country. You can be part of it. Nothing is holding us back from starting fresh. This is our time.
Tim, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me and for all your work to help us change our minds, change our attitudes, and find a new us. You have a great tone and a great message. We're thrilled at Unite.us to be a part of your audience too.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided is the opinion of our guest and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows on demand, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, and be sure to follow the show on social media. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.